Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Audible. You know, I don't consider myself a very conspiratorial person. The moon landing, definitely real. Elvis probably died in 1977. But there's one conspiracy that I'm really starting to latch onto. X-Men Dark Phoenix is never ever going to be released traditionally in theaters. That may sound pretty dumb, and you know, maybe it is. There's a decent chance that you can all revisit this video around this time next year and have a good laugh at my expense, and I wouldn't really blame you. But lately, well, I've been thinking about Dark Phoenix and Disney a lot, and the more I do, the more unlikely a real release of this movie seems to me. So for those of you who don't know, which is probably not many of you, so I'll try to keep this part short, Disney is acquiring Fox in a deal that's historic, massive, and pretty deeply troubling from a media consolidation perspective, but I'm here to talk about the X-Men, so let's stick with that. Many MCU fans, myself definitely included, are really excited to see how Kevin Feige and company work everyone's favorite mutants into the already huge MCU. There's a ton of exciting possibilities there, so much so that I actually already made a video about it a few months ago. But then there's Dark Phoenix, the sequel to the not exactly beloved X-Men Apocalypse and the last gasp of the X-Men Fox franchise. Well, okay, Deadpool not included. Anyway, I find the position that Dark Phoenix is in to be really interesting, because I can't think of anything like it in film history. Sure, there's stuff like what happened to the Drew Goddard Joss Whedon horror movie Cabin in the Woods, where the completely broke MGM was taken over by a new regime who didn't really want to release the movie, and it ended up sitting on a shelf for a long time before eventually being sold to Lionsgate and released by them. But Dark Phoenix is definitely different. X-Men is a brand name, and to Marvel it's now a highly important one, and there's probably no company more aware of the value of a brand name than Disney. And now they have a huge amount of interest in making sure that value is not diminished.
We're very happy to have you back, even for a short visit.
It's wonderful to see you again, Professor.
Take Spider-Man. Remember those infamous Sony hacks from a few years ago? One of the most interesting things to come of those, well, from a superhero fan perspective at least, was getting to see Kevin Feige's notes to Sony on Amazing Spider-Man 2, where he points out all the movie's failures, especially honing in on the character of Peter Parker, saying that the movie's spy parents subplot undermined the idea that Peter is just a normal kid from Queens, and saying that Garfield's Spider-Man needs to be more honorable and less wishy-washy. And remember, this is long before Marvel started working with Sony on Homecoming. They had no financial stake in the film, but it's pretty clear they think even a bad movie featuring a Marvel character could hurt their most valuable IPs, which brings us back to Dark Phoenix. Unlike Amazing Spider-Man 2, Dark Phoenix is now Disney's to do with it what they want, so it's safe to assume no one's going to be ignoring Kevin Feige's notes this time around. It's well known that they're doing a few weeks of reshoots, not the 3 months that some places online previously reported, so yeah, you could see that as proof that the movie is still happening. But I'm not so sure. For one thing, these reshoots were scheduled before the acquisition was finalized and voted on. But more importantly, the cost of the reshoots, and really the entire cost of Dark Phoenix, isn't that much money to a conglomerate as huge as Disney. If they think the smart thing for X-Men the brand is starting from scratch, and they know they have a bad or honestly even mediocre movie on their hands, I can see them quietly putting it out to pasture instead of spending millions more to market a movie they really have no faith in. Now, okay, if Dark Phoenix is actually a great movie, especially after the reshoots, that could be a different story. But if it isn't, I absolutely think that Disney and Marvel would be willing to stomach losing the $180 million or so it took to make, because that could be a pretty small price to pay to make sure that audiences aren't soured on the X-Men even more than they already are, especially after Apocalypse's pretty disappointing box office. The MCU is famously very planned out ahead of time, with Marvel saying they have 20 movies planned for after Infinity War. So I just don't see them being thrilled with pushing out this other superhero movie that doesn't really fit into the MCU at all.
I am unhurt, but that is more than I can say for my cranberry glaze.
Then there's the release date. After being shoved out of its November 2018 spot on the schedule, Dark Phoenix is now slated to come out on February 14th, 2019. Which is actually a pretty great spot. It's similar to Black Panther's release date, and, that turned out pretty well. But it's also less than a month before the first MCU movie of the year, Captain Marvel, is released. Which just doesn't seem like great scheduling to me, and if I was Marvel, I definitely wouldn't want X-Men taking that earlier slot. Add to that the fact that Dark Phoenix had no presence at Comic-Con, an event that Fox has really gone all out for in the past, and things just don't look too good for that February release date. Alright, so here's my theory, and I admit this could be a little far-fetched, so, break out the tinfoil hats. I think one of two things is going to happen. Either Disney will bury this movie with almost zero promotion and hope that it doesn't embarrass itself too much, and it just kind of flies under the radar, or, and this is the much more interesting option I think, they save it until the release of the upcoming Disney streaming service, and have the movie there as an exclusive on launch day as one of many things to entice people to sign up. I think this would be really smart for all sorts of reasons. It means they spend less on marketing, it doesn't interfere with Captain Marvel's scheduling, and it's a way to quietly shunt the movie to the side without completely shelving it. It's clear that Disney is betting big on this streaming service, with some executives even calling it the future of the company. So where Dark Phoenix could be a very high-profile embarrassment for them if it does badly in February, it would be a huge asset as part of Disney streaming. I mean, think about it, what other streaming service launched with a massive blockbuster exclusive to their service? It's like if CBS All Access had launched with Star Trek Beyond and Star Trek Discovery, which is a pretty hard proposition to pass up for fans, even if they're already paying for HBO or Netflix. And we already know that Marvel, along with Star Wars of course, will be a huge part of attracting people to the service. After all, it has to offer something for people who just aren't that interested in the Disney classics. So yeah, I'm making this bet now. If you ever do see Dark Phoenix, it won't be in theaters, but on your Roku, laptop, PlayStation, or whatever. But I want to know, what do you think? Do you want the movie on the big screen? Would it be okay streaming? Or do you think the studio should just dump it all together? And which do you think is most likely? This is one where I'd really love to read your thoughts and comments. If there's one thing a good X-Men story absolutely has to nail, it's the team dynamics and camaraderie. That's what I want in most genre fiction, really. But it's really hard to balance that with big, larger-than-life sci-fi stories. So I want to recommend one book that managed to do it incredibly well, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Written by Becky Chambers, I've been really into this book lately. Honestly, if you're into shows like Firefly and The Expanse, or just love a good ragtag team like the Guardians of the Galaxy, I can't recommend it highly enough. And the best way to experience it is definitely through Audible. It easily has the largest collection of audiobooks out there. And maybe the best part is that if you decide a book really isn't for you, it's not a problem and you can just exchange it for another one. Another great feature is that you get a new credit to get a book every month, so you really feel like you're getting a chance to check out everything that's out there. If you want to listen to The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet or anything else they have available, you can get a credit to get any book you want by going to audible.com/midnight or just texting midnight to 500-500. Again, that's audible.com/midnight or just text on your phone midnight to 500-500.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.